perhaps it's the perfect time to remember and give a little thought and perhaps a little gift of honey or nuts or chocolate or fruit to the fair folk, the kindly ones, those unseen, except perhaps in the corner of the eye or just behind the ear or in the small of your back or diving out of a room just as you come in. Those mischievous at times, those kindly at times. Speak well of them. They can be a little bit mischievous, I've been told, but I've never seen that. They've already been good to me, I'm sure they have. A strange thing perhaps to be talking about beings invisible, beings never seen, only told of in story and song. I'm thinking, what else? How else could you describe them? Because of course we don't know everything. There's so much we can't see, we have such huge blind spots. Perhaps we could describe them as, what else is there of those we do not know? And while I can't speak as to their empirical reality, when you spend time addressing the wee ones, the unseen ones, whether they're ghosts or ancestors or nature spirits, miniature gods, major gods, when you spend time talking to them, sometimes it feels like they talk back. And that's something to enjoy. Perhaps with trepidation. There's fairy traditions throughout the islands and I think throughout Europe, and I'm sure elsewhere, though I'm less familiar with elsewhere. There's a very strong Celtic influence to them over here in Ireland, Scotland, Cornwall, Wales. And there's a strong Old English and Norse tradition to them, and the elves, the land wights and such. I felt them at times as something almost to fall backwards on, like it's a drama exercise. You fall backwards and they catch you. That's often how I've felt. But also it feels a little bit as if that which we call fairy or fairyland is as much a part of existence as it's not. And it may be a place we find ourselves in at times, away from this more mundane world, everyday world that we think about. And sometimes it's quite hard to come back. There's a famous story, I think, of Oisin, an Irish warrior who travelled to fairyland centuries and centuries ago. Was told he could return, was lent a horse, but was told, don't get off the horse when you come back. And whether it was because the saddle broke, or he just longed to walk on his homeland once more, he did get off the horse. And the people witnessed him turn immediately to dust. The centuries had passed in fairy. No, centuries had passed in our world, passed in fairy. It had been a matter of a few nights, perhaps. People are famously taken there to dance, and for other purposes. You'll see in a couple of these poems. I think I shall begin with a kind of invocatory poem. In Ireland, there is a group of the fairy called the Tuatha Dé Danann, also known as the Sidhe, and they are said to be older generations of people, older tribes of people who, when humans arrived there, retreated into the hills to become the fairy folk. So I'll begin with this one, which is a prayer to their mother, because the name, the Tuatha De Danann, means the tribe of Danu. And this poem is called Danu. Can you hear me, Danu, mother of the gods? Can you hear me, Danu, mother of the earth? Can you hear me, Danu, mother of the tooth? Can you hear me, Danu? Can you hear? As you fall from your mother's womb, as you place your step on the road, as you stand your ground in the fight, as you spill to your lover's bed, as you weep to your child's cry, as you bend to your royal crown, as you reap from a harvest bright, as you sow from the wisdom won, as you lay on your beacon fire, as you breathe my name on your final sigh, I hear. I've read this one before online, this next one. I mentioned that people were often taken across the fine and shining line to dance or similar. Here's an instance where a woman is taken across to act as midwife for a child's birth. And this is called the Midwife. They've given the human midwife some ointment for the eyes of the babe she's just delivered. So she's smoothing out his cries, and she's smeared a drop on her own eyelids, and seen in some surprise that the birthing room's in a mouldy hole beneath the hill of sighs. They'd come to her in the smallest hours and banged upon the door, a coachman and a flighty maid, to urgently implore that she come within their carriage bold across the boggy moor to the cavernous halls of a shadowy manse she'd never seen before. The master who greeted them on the path was wild, with eyes aglare and a beading of froth upon his lip, a mouth hung with despair, and he's pulling her into the shadowy manse and up the dizzying stair to a drenched bed and the dreadful screams of a young girl rolling there, and she's sending them all for water, and she's sending them for a knife to ease the woman and cut the cord and save the baby's life, a tendering hand upon the brow to calm her in her strife, the delicate gentleman storming about, a-grieving for his wife. She sent them all into the yard and brought the mother to peace. She's coaxed the baby out of the womb and laid it on a fleece. The cord is tied in double knots and cut, at last release from the strains of birth for ma and boy in quiet and surcease, except this wild young master, with his face and hair aglow, thrusts a glistening ointment in her hands. Anoint him with it now! A dab upon each of the baby's eyes, but wiping of her brow, smears a drop or two on her own eyelids. And this is how she knows that the birthing room's a mouldy hole, the drenched bed's a mere, the mother is strung around with rags, the maid's a toothy sneer upon two legs, the coachman looming high is half a man, half bear, and the lion's smile in the master's mouth is biting at the air, and the mother new upon the bed, she holds her with a stare. Do not reveal the things you see, but smile if you dare. Make calm escape in quiet haste, allow no look of fear to betray you. See what you can see within the darkness here. With quick and measured step she walks, stifling her cries with her fist, and with the other wiping fiercely at her eyes. rise, stepping over gleaming bones to reach at last the skies. And she stood now at the cavern door, upon the hill of sighs. Bit of a time. Andrew, hi, hello, good to see you, thank you. That story, I think, occurs quite frequently in fairy lore, the wise woman being plucked into another world for purposes of the fae folk. You know the word silly? Oh, they're silly, they're very silly. You know where it comes from? The court of the fairy is called the Seelie court. And those who have crossed the line and been there, well, those who are considered touched. And so anyone who's not making a great deal of sense about where they've been, the things they've seen, will be called Seelie, which survives still as silly. And this poem is called Seelie and is about that sense of trying to come back, to return from wherever that place is, and how it's not always an easy thing to do. Seelie. And those of us that manage, out of choice or need for health, to find our way again, out and away, and through that velvet silver mist which gleams, a scuttled dream upon the field, the way between and calling, where the light shows more bright than any sun has seen, but will not fall on earth, from which the old kingdom music beats like a heart, but never heard here on this further side. And those of us that do, finding sudden hunger never known in the womb, and a chill within the lung, and the iron that has kept us never truly part of there, heavy sudden in our blood. Those of us are trembling, stepping into here, out of mist, out of clarity of crystal air, of golden eyes and ebony hair, of fingers interlocking, words of carefree devotion in the ear, and all the mourning moan and keen despair of leaving it all behind, sickening in our bellies. Some of us can only crawl. Those of us coming back to time, to hope for return, to home perhaps, stumble over thistle, find ourselves shadowed by the wall built by our past and fearful masters and their carls. Across the fields they know, along the bright and shining line, to keep folk from fairy out. And those of us who manage to return behind. We are the ones they say did fall, did waste away, the damned. Forsook the world and ruled ourselves unfit. Believe their fairy tale. The kindly ones themselves were never so cruel. For those of us who do at times feel ourselves outside of the world and finding it very hard to be allowed back in. So, a fairy promise. If you do not take my hand, you will live. A fairy's promise. Seeing out your days and nights, walking ways never cause to grieve. Planning on the harvest, wind and rain, still you will remain. Waiting for another, waiting for another to come, to come, to come again. Eyes open, nothing pressing, take the step alone with me, no good goodbye. The palace falls, the stays and guards all slip aside. Now dance, now dance, now dance until the end. I stepped away, backward from pursuers, into cloud and haze, into fairy. Touch became something only I could feel. Never noticed again what they hunted. It had no sound anyway, no voice that could be heard, only listened to. And now I was in breath, held, turning slowly. Everything is turning, everything is slow, at the edge of things. It was the tiniest pinch on the tip of my little finger. Two hands clasped like a cup around an acorn shy. And a pair of eyes, tender like a moon, and a moon on water, louder than a moon, with their questions and a greater gravity. Holly prickle in the look, bramble catching. This thing would hang on me, scrabbling at my arm, perching on my shoulder, pointing to a shade between the silver cumulus and slate cirrus scratch. Step, its fingers said. There is enough, you do not need much. The cloud arranged itself again like a stomach. I could hear the babble of a faraway place, but here the light was music. Every gaze I saw was a fall. Every figure was a sting of tears in the corner of an eye. There was approach and it was safe. There was a kiss from their lips to my cheek. And it was arrival. There was drink offered. The first one to speak said, "Welcome." The second one, "There is blood, but it is not yours." The third was clambering out of a rent in my sternum. "We must put honey in here. Honey is wise." The fourth wanted to hear me speak, but waited. The fifth said, "The rest that you need is being prepared." The sixth one to speak told tales that would let the tears know when to stop, when to trip to laughter. The seventh and the eighth shared a look and said, "We love you." The ninth wore a crown. The ninth wore a beauty that brought me to myself. The ninth dressed me in their gown, and when they spoke, there was a few poems there all running together. Faery Promise, A Welcome, and Arrival. I recognise a fair bit of this is inspired also by Lord Dunsany, or Lord Dunsany, with his book The King of Elfland's Daughter. Talks often of the bright and shining line and the fields we know. Another road into Faery might well be that white line that comes from the moon across the sea to that stretch of beach where you're stood upon. That silvery road that I'm sure we've all thought, could I walk across there? Moonline. Line of white, threaded long across the 9 waves. Silver gleam of sweat riding the white-backed stallion. Glow of fairy gloaming through the glamour of a full bright night. Fog shining fair over fields thoroughfare to Elfland. Blue stone door made bare and blazing by Oberon's hand. Mound under moor's edge mounted for the sake of a poet's sight. And on her smooth and softening thigh with gloves removed, a stroke of moonlight will also lead the way into paradise. Don't cry, no. Do not cry. Ye shall be there by and by. By and by. Because we don't necessarily need to go across any bright and shining line to find ourselves in the company of the wild and mischievous, especially out in the woods, or on Midsummer's Eve, Midsummer's Day, especially if we're around somewhere like Stonehenge. Some of you may have heard this one before, but I hope you enjoyed it then, I hope you enjoy it now. Another name for Stonehenge, I learned, is called the Giant's Dance, and that gave rise to this poem. Last night, I walked amongst the hanging stones of old Stonehenge, content to see if I might learn the famous Giant's Dance. I trod a careful, measured step, though sometimes I skipped, to hold a self-awareness in the slowly falling trance. The earth was firm, my foot was sure, the moon was clear, and all the stars aloft. The stones were firm set in a silver gleam, my count was certain, but still, sometimes I faltered and tripped a jar of limbs, shock enough to keep my sense within the dream. And so, with each blink, I caught the hint of a glinted glance, the sarsen standing bright with measured moon, of fairy followers flitting along beside to a fitful borrowed tune, my feet still holding firm upon the steady beat and merry. A solid tread I sought to keep upon the heavy ground, a rooted walk. The winged gleams are washing against my corner eye. A step on step and a swirling around, a planted foot and progress made to 7 points above, below, ahead, behind, to left and right and forward into time, only to find that time was bent. The way I'd first intended was broken and spent, a fold of the earth, and now, upon another route, another way I went, where feet on the ground were no longer a certainty. Plod as I might on the sod, a lighter foot or 3 was now delivering me, a grip on my arms, a grin at my ear, to flighty cavorting, knees were jangling, bantering, kicking a high and dexterous caper over my head as fiddlers strung the flighty stones with quivering, rollicking, jingling tunes. Away with a sauntering swagger, a stagger of fairyland instruments, trumpets, fiddles, and thumpering drums, silvery masks with tittering features, jubilant horns and hoofings, leathery wings. I found myself taken by arms demoniacal, slender as luminous swans, and flying me over the grass and the tussocks, forbearing me, carrying all in a debris around and around and around and around and around and around over circling ground, no touch of a leaf of the lawn underneath my dangling feet. My slippers completely away, my wig given up to the wind. My so heavy coat was thrown as a serpent's skin, and all of my gold. Above me the stones, magnificent giants exploding up from their seats and dancing, thundering hard to the numinous beat. The thrum of the drum had the hanging stones jumping, the swipe of the pipes had the breezes competing, the wings of the strings brought my heavy weight flung to the stars, and all the trees on the roundabout plains throwing their leaves in a somersault dance over opening howls, a gaping ground, the simper of unsettled bones. My vision distorted, my hearing contorted, my writhing limbs as stripped as a willow, consorted with full underbellies and thighs or hairy, lies in the arms of a fairy wheel, a reel, or spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and... I woke on the morrow with my heart free of sorrow. The tunes I had borrowed echoing over the stones, the barrows, the settling plain. The giants dance. I said that happened last night as if it were a true story. I might have fibbed. I won't confirm that. But this next one is a true story, as it occurred when I was touring an island, and one of our digs for a time was in Newry, and there was a mountain there. Top of the mountain, I say mountain, it's a very big hill, was a court barrow. And I went up there a few times. And one time I went up there in thick mist, and it felt like a particular atmosphere. And I felt I should approach this with great gravity and respect. And it turned out that instead of just walking the path to it, it was necessary to follow a kind of labyrinth in my mind, turning this way and that way, going in towards the centre, then out to the edges, before finally finding my way in. And then speaking again, respectfully, reverently, introducing myself, asking if I could be there. And I like to think I found a welcome in the end, over that visit and a couple of others after. And I tried to capture some of it in this, on visiting a court barrow in Ireland. I'm climbing the hill in fog. This is the slenderest beginning of the route. Between these steps, the road becomes a different road, a path, perhaps, beneath, feeling of silver, it calls for a left. I'm onto grass now since I don't know when, forgiving me the weight and my clumsy relationship. Stones in a mist like teeth, pretending they're not dancing. So far, so good. Did you not hear? He's in English. Through the thinner air, the path meets my foot with a wink. Labyrinth in my mind, out to the furthest. Find yourself home already. Hello, stones. Hello, man. Hello, says the... Thank you for your name, for the walking of the path so reverently. Sit. Play for us. But I'm on the mountainside, with the mist, and the notes of my penny whistle sing across the valley, for the fair invisible listening. How are you doing? I didn't know which of these poems to do. Yeah, I just pulled out a heap of them that touch on the fairy folk, and I'm kind of feeling in the moment which ones to read and how long to read for. I mean, of course, you're perfectly at liberty to stick around as long as you want. I hope you will continue to stick around. I wonder what to read you next. Now, I wonder, I don't know if Andrew's still online, I hope so, because Andrew and I met doing one of Shakespeare's fairy type plays, and he was the fairy. Well, I say that, he was Caliban. But this one is also steeped in Shakespeare, but it's about his other fairy play, The Midsummer Night's Dream. In some ways you could say it's what happened after, or at least that's my thought. It uses a lot of Shakespeare's own words, only mixed up and thrown into a different order. You might recognise them. And the poem is called Puck in Love with Mustard Seed. They kiss, of course. Just tongues or lips, not both. Keep something back. She sponges dewdrops on his nose and leads him, spirit, up and down, a flaunty dance, a ringlet, from the brush and briar of her hair. He hangs a pearl within her cowslip ear, and lurking in the bowl cries raucous words and jelly winks, adorning her with curds. Morning finds them crept into acorn cups on the ground, sleeping sound and holding hips. They take the night as blanket, play Athenians in the wood, and scratchy on the green. Or they fall till once again Aurora comes, Cobweb blows a raspberry and shows her bum. Perhaps it was the watching of her scratch the ass, the ear, the queen of fairies catch, that did bestir a monster to be moved, or else beware. Or was it idle love, still smeared on mitts unwashed, and wiping tears of laughter from his cheeks, did her endear and stain the knavish lob with purple wound? But for tired heart or fired tongue he swooned. Alas, no almanac is found to tell us aught of the mechanics of it all. Though certain 'tis a moon did shine that night, a dream without a bottom holds the sprite. The Athenians did it, with rough cast and mirth, and now is placed a girdle round the earth. Crazy little thing called love. how it affects all of us, even the fair folk. Just a wee drop in the horn and a wee drop poured for the invisible guests. Was there? Okay. The Faery Road has ties to Ireland in that it's inspired by the Irish folk belief that in building your cottage you should put your front door and your back door directly in line, with nothing between, so that if by some mischance you build it over a fairy road, the fair folk will come in and head straight out again and not get confused by any corners or doors. Because gorgeous as they are, you may not want them hanging around your house. So here we are, the Fairy Road. I would close the door, but the elfin creatures batter and call at the boards and the hinges, such a furore. Should I leave it ajar, it is soon flung wide, a clatter in the hall like a car going through and a coachman's yah! When I came to this cot by the dun, an almighty brawl, smashed pots on the floor, every night's what I got. Till I pulled down the bricks that had blocked up the way in the opposing wall, fixing for relief from the fairies' tricks. Opening the highway clear once again for the Seelie processional, gaily progressing to the mounds of the Fae. But the hours that they keep, with a tumultuous dance at the Elf Queen's ball, or the leap to the wild hunt, dragging me from sleep with a summons of the door chime, bing bong, to listen to their song and record it all. Whatever time may be kept by the fairy, it has no reason or rhyme. Not that I'm complaining. No, certainly not. That theme's picked up again in this, as is the leaving of gifts. Almost like a little show of gratitude, of appreciation for everything you already have, and the trust that you'll have what you need when you need it. And as I said at the beginning, this, with so many blind spots in our awareness and psychology, you might even describe them as, what else is there? The kindly folk and fair. A door at the front, another at the back, and nothing in between them. So they may have their fairy track and pass along unseen. To let them have their fairy road and never need to stray, nor lost nor crossed in my own wee abode. That is the kindly way. A bowl of milk set on the step, or nuts left on the sill, so that frith and kindliness be kept with those of hidden will. That frith and kindliness be had from fall to summer's day, throughout the year a listening ear. That is the kindly way. Yon modern men may scoff and smirk my ancient styles to see a portion of my work set out for well and be. When's porridge left within the bowl, some can smile and say that's the portion of the work of a fool, in their unkindly way. But there's uncanny things can lurk in the kinks of an unkept room, in the shadowed heart, or the minds that shirk, and in all that lies unknown, beneath a bed, inside a gut, things barred at the edge of sight, things coming in as we go out, or hovered on the night, in all the shades and shackles, in the toiling of the worm, in soil's shift, in rattles at the door, the ancient squirm of falsehood feared, of love revoked, and tangles in the hair, these things unseen and soon provoked, the kindly ones and fair, the kindly ones, the fair, the good, the happy folk, we say. To call them else in field or wood calls ruin on the day, when so much hides in the dark of men. To the unseen we can pay all the kindliness they'd have again. That is the wisest way, to have their care in this world of pain. We keep the kindly way. Another recurring theme in tales of fairy folk, leprechauns included, is if you catch one, you could demand things from it. And this is a tale of such a bargain. He still has the feel within his hand, like a burn scar, of a flare of light around swelling hips and kicking legs, tiny breasts in his palm, and the half-remembered flicker of wings like the clash of eyelashes. And when she'd stilled, opened her eyes as full as they might go, moon size, and said, "Let me go. I will bring you riches. Let me go." And his fist screamed, "No!" But his mind thought, and with the bargain sealed, and she released, and the qualm in his heart, she was never his to free or hold. He sits within the rustle of dried leaves, cries, "Fairy! Where is my gold?" Because of course that gleaming bag of gold is actually so often just a pile of leaves and petals. So, which else to read? Just a few more, I think, before we finish. Thank you so much for joining me and for listening. I hope you've enjoyed. That one does talk of elves, but it's a midwinter poem, it's a Yuletide one, so I'll leave that be for now, because we are Midsummer. I shall do Midsummer's Eve, The Return, Shining Line, and maybe, oh, we'll see how we go. But certainly next it's going to be this one, Midsummer's Eve. So this is a tale of what happened last night. On the Midsummer's Eve, as the sun sinks red, and the hare tilts her head to hear the foxes breathe, and the cow, grass-fed, bends a golden knee to the solar majesty sinking tired into bed. Then the children of the she From their cots and their byres to the tussocks of the shires, gin their dancing spree. From the edges of the fires in a gathering swell, to the walls of the wishing well, fishing out desires and divining what the coins tell of mortals' need and the humans' greed, and their fear of the bell as the fates decreed, and the cries in the night ringing sharp out of sight of a dreadful deed, and the fairies' fight over wishes to bestow, or of promises to blow, and of landlords to slight, can be heard in the flow of the clamorous air, or caught in the flare, in the golden glow of the lady's hair, of the queen, of the fay, of the rider gay on her bristling mare, till the first new ray that the dawn might bequeath springs sharper in teeth into midsummer's day. Then quickly to the heath all the fair folk and kind, from the world left behind to the world underneath, must make their way, must make their way, must make their way from Midsummer's Day. I'm sure Puck has a few words to say about the oncoming dawn, though I can't remember them. I've been in the play a number of times and seen it a number of times, but that quote from Puck I can't quite recall. Spoke at the beginning about the difficulty of returning from Faery to the world. This one call to return might be the desire, once returned to the world, to know I actually want to go back into Faery. Please don't let me stay here. The return. The fog has too much taste of iron. There is a catch now in my throat. It brings a wheeze at the end of every breath. There is no sweet grass underfoot. In other times the step was soft, giving. There was nothing that kicked back or scattered. I do not think I'm on the right path. There is no call of music or little laughter on the air, and the air was warm then and silver when I trod it before, so simply. When the way forward was a hand-clasping pull into a forward blooming heart. To find my way back this time, Faery has a price. Slough off the flesh, leave blood behind, no bones either, before the king's throne. Perhaps that yearning to return to somewhere more idyllic. Perhaps it's a quest we shouldn't follow. I don't know. I will do 2 more and then it'll be done. Hi Michael, thank you for joining again. So here we are, 2 more. The shining line and the thoughts of being returned, coming back from that place of bliss, wherever it is. Let's call it Faery, but hopefully you've been there or somewhere like it. So this is called the shining line. But something was left in Faery when I came back over the line. My hair, they say, is still golden, and my boots are soft and fine. My dancing is ever as light as the sun, my stillness retains its shine. But something was left in Faery when they brought me back over the line. I doffed my hat to Jill today. She promised she still was mine. Her mother drove me into the yard for a blessing upon the kine. Her father gave his forgiveness over a glass of mulberry wine. But something was left in the mist when they fetched me back over the line. The priest, he gives a flinch of fear and the flick of a warding sign. The children play out a game of me with giggles and wonderment in their eyne. The haughty mistress in the hall has summoned me there to dine, to ask me what was in fairyland and what has been left behind, and are there golden apples grown with grapes of silver on the vine? Do the handsomest lords of fairy dance, and do they number 9? Does one of them step away at last? Does one of those princes pine for a mistress all of raven hair, who was snatched back over the line? Then her breast is thrown against my own, her lips in my hair entwine. Her lips are scrabbling at my mouth for a taste of a breath divine. The tears upon her cheek do fall and mingle a while with mine. But we part unhappy and lost, for whatever has never strayed across the line. The doctor was called for the mistress, amazed at her sudden and sharp decline. I took myself to visit with Jill, found her feeding her goats and swine. A light surrounding her, bright and sure, ran ribbons around my spine. Told me this perhaps is where I belong, upon this side of the shining line. Should I take that treasure that never was took, nor lost across the line? And this the last. I suppose in the context of this arc, this could be Jill's and that young man's daughter telling this one. Hanging out the laundries in the Tenterfield. Mother and me in the Tenterfield, the parish linen hung to dry. Not a breath held by the air, the sunshine melting half the sky. She drew me to a hollow dell, with look askance and squinting eye. Quickly, girl, and bring a sheet of the rector's bed, the soft and white, the one I washed on the softer stone, that wears its weave and weft so light. I'll show you now a thing or two that few have had in sight. Take the corner there and t'other. I will hold these in my hands, and when I say so, hold it high, this willow sheet of finer strands, but let it waft down as it might, and watch it as it lands. The blaze of white up in the air, the catch of stilly air beneath, we neither pulled, but let it sink, as gentle as a baby's breath, a tender billow on the air and tumble of the heath. As so it sank as into sleep, and settled like a snowy ground. No wind of motion stirred a corner, no humming bumble made a sound, but there were hints of something underneath, and moving soft around. As little heads and tiny beasts might move beneath a trapping awning, The scurries under cleric's sheet, disturbed like breezes in the corn, like fish's breath within the stream, or paw prints in the dew at dawn. And as I bent my gaze, my mother shook her head and told me, "No, we're not to look beneath the sheet. If these the good Lord will not show in light of day," she said, "my girl, it's best we never know." A corner slipped my finger's grip and flashed as if a body flew away. I placed my hand upon the sheet before I let the others stray. And there I felt a palm press meet my own, and for a moment stay. Two palms together pressed on either side of this dividing veil to pray. The sheet then, with a whip of heart, was pulled and gathered in my mother's arms. The dell was just a hollow, set with buttercups and daisy charms. And I, enfolded by her laundress skill, took mother's warding from all harms.